Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Geneva Peace Talks. We will now hear a message from the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres.
On the International Day of Peace, we reflect on the cruel price of war. Ruined schools, bombed hospitals, broken families, refugees searching for hope, countries in crisis. The United Nations was born from a terrible world war. Our mission is to work for peace, every day and everywhere. No group interest, national ambition or political difference should be allowed to put peace at risk. On this International Day, we call for a global ceasefire. We must never, ever stop pressing for an end to armed conflict. Peace is the right and the desire of all people. It is a foundation for progress and well-being, happy children, thriving communities, and peaceful, prosperous countries. Let us pledge to work together, today and every day, for the peace we all yearn for and deserve.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Geneva Peace Talks 2017. We have just heard the words of the United Nations Secretary General on the occasion of the International Day of Peace. This day is dedicated to strengthening the ideals of peace within and among nations and peoples. I'm delighted to see so many of you here today to honor this day together. Allow me also to give a warm welcome to all those who are following the Geneva Peace Talks online and through social media. I'm Achim Wennmann, the Executive Coordinator of the Geneva Peace Building Platform.
And I'm Vivian Brunne. I work for the Director General of the United Nations in Geneva. Together, we will be your moderators today. The Geneva Peace Talks is a joint initiative between the United Nations in Geneva, Interpeace, and the Geneva Peace Building Platform. They aim to create an additional space for dialogue about building peace and resolving conflict.
The theme for the 5th edition of the Geneva Peace Talks is Building Bridges. Bridges symbolically stand for connections between territories and people. They can reach across a deep divide, but also connect the distance between those closest to us. Our theme tonight, therefore, is about breaking silos and tearing down walls to find solutions to peace. And it is also about finding out how each of us can build new partnerships between people. This sense of partnerships is at the heart of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and is the very essence of building peaceful and inclusive societies.
The Geneva Peace Talks are here to give you hope in a world of violence and conflict. They're an initiative to showcase inspirational stories of people who have made actual contributions to peace. They will also illustrate how each and every one of us can make a contribution to build peace and resolve conflict. Today, we will hear the stories of 11 exceptional people. They are all building bridges in their own very individual ways. The peace talks you will hear today are divided into 3 parts. The first part is all about what it takes to build bridges, from personal transformation, the bricks and mortar of cultural heritage, to diplomacy. The second part will go on a tour around the world. We will look at building bridges through music in North and South Korea, by bringing out the truth in Tunisia, through police reform in Colombia, and collaborative research on security in the Balkans. And we will also hear about one man's very personal motivation to mediate between ethnic communities in the north of Kenya. The final part will take us back home to Geneva. We will be hearing international and local stories about integration around the joint meal and about the powerful role of the media to build bridges.
The Geneva Peace Talks are made possible with the generous support of the Swiss Confederation, the Republic and Canton of Geneva, the City of Geneva, and Mirabeau. Before we start, allow me to highlight a few practical points. The first is that this is a multilingual event, and simultaneous interpretation is available into English, French, and Spanish through the earpieces which you find at your desks. The second point is that there will be an opportunity to reach out to all speakers during the reception that is organized after this event. And please, for this reason, we do not foresee any questions or answers after the speakers are talking. Then allow me to note that the talks you are about to hear do not necessarily reflect the views of the organizers or the sponsors. And finally, please switch off your mobile phone. Please do not use flash photography, but please do use your social media. And our hashtag is GVA Peace Talks.
Now let's start with our first part about what it takes to build bridges. Our first speaker has gone through his own very personal transformation, from skinhead to peace builder. He co-founded an NGO called Life After Hate, and he helps to build bridges to people who also wish to disengage from the far-right violent movements. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Christian Picciolini.
Thank you. Mr. Anand, distinguished guests, welcome to the Geneva Peace Talks. My journey began 22 years ago when I finally left the American neo-Nazi skinhead movement that I helped build from its earliest beginnings. I was 22 years old at the time, but I had already spent 8 years, every one of my teen years, learning how to hate, learning violence, and being a part of America's first neo-Nazi skinhead group. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, and I'd like to tell you the story of how I got there. I wasn't born into hate. In fact, I lived a relatively normal childhood. I had loving family constantly around me, and my parents are immigrants who went to the United States in the mid-1960s. But they were often the victims of prejudice themselves. And although I was surrounded by family, my parents went to work to start a small business, which kept them away from home 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, and I missed them very much. I couldn't understand why my parents weren't there for my school events or my sporting games, and I often wondered silently what I had done to push them away. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in an Italian neighborhood. But shortly after I was born, my parents moved us away from that neighborhood to another community that was not as diverse as the Italian community that I grew up in. And when I went to school, I wasn't accepted there. I was seen as a foreigner, and I was bullied relentlessly. And every day after school, someone would pick me up, usually not my parents, and would take me back to the Italian community where my grandparents lived. And the kids there, the children, also saw me as an outsider. So for the first 13 and a half years of my life, I lived a very solitary life where I wondered who I was and where I fit in. Until one day at 14 years old, I was standing in the street and I was smoking a marijuana joint, and a man came up to me. The year was 1987 and I was 14 years old, and he grabbed the joint from my mouth and he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Don't you know that that's what the communists and the Jews want you to do to keep you docile?" I was 14 years old. I didn't know what a communist was or what a Jew was, and to be honest, I didn't know what the word docile meant. It's true. I had to look it up actually before I came. But this man, who was twice my age, approached me, and he drew me in. He knew that I was searching for something, and he made me feel special, and he brought me in to a community of people that I thought cared about me. What I didn't know or fully understand at that time was that what I was getting involved in was America's first neo-Nazi skinhead group. I started to learn the rhetoric, and I began to commit acts of violence, and I learned how to recruit other vulnerable young people. Young people are our hope, but they're also our most vulnerable as they start to develop their own identities. And in fact, I'm here to tell you that radicalization and extremism is not a product of ideology. In fact, it results from a broken search for identity, community, and purpose. If people look for those things, which we all do, we're all vulnerable to that, we all go through those essential human needs. If we stumble, and if we fall into what I call potholes on our journey for that search, and those potholes can be trauma, abuse, addiction, extreme poverty, chronic unemployment, mental health issues, or even extreme privilege, we become disconnected when we try to find our place in the world. And young people, as they're developing this identity, if they come from a place that's broken, or if they don't get the support that they need as they're growing and looking for those passions, it's very possible that there is a very savvy recruiter waiting for you to fill whatever void you need that will eventually lead you down a dark corridor. I denounced white supremacy over 20 years ago, and I've been working since then to help other people like me disengage from far-right extremism, from neo-Nazism. And I understand when I speak with people that what I need to do is listen more than I speak. Because when I listen, what I hear inevitably are those potholes that existed in their lives that diverted their path. And instead of arguing, instead of debating ideologically with them, although I want to very much, what I do is I start to fill in the potholes. I will provide job services or career counseling or mental health support or tattoo removal for these people. Because what I know, having been involved myself, is that while they may do monstrous things, the people who do them are not monsters. They're broken individuals who are crying silently for help. So when I work with them, I listen for their brokenness, and I try to fix it. I will introduce Holocaust deniers to Holocaust survivors as part of this process, or Islamophobes to the most welcoming Muslim families. And what I try to do is dismantle the demonizing that happens in their head of people that most times they've never met. And I try to build that bridge to humanize people. Hatred is born of ignorance. Fear is its father, and isolation is its mother. We fear what we don't understand, and if we're so isolated from it, that fear and that isolation could turn into hatred. So I urge you today to go out there and be bridge builders, be pothole fillers, and make good happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian, for such a powerful opening peace talk of our Geneva Peace Talks 2017. In our next talk, we will hear about bridge building in the real sense. Azra Hadžić is an architect from Bosnia and Herzegovina and will speak about her work on the reconstruction of the Mostar Bridge and the importance of protecting cultural heritage in times of war. It's a great pleasure, Azra, that you're with us.
Esteemed hosts, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be here with you today. Today we celebrate the International Day of Peace. And thus I would like to stress 2 points. What's the peace exactly, and why I wish to talk of heritage today? According to some definitions, peace can be defined as a state of tranquility found in the society which is not disturbed by conflict, or a state that allows the members of the community to enjoy prosperity, both personal and society. The reason I wish to talk of heritage today is quite simple. It's because heritage is important. As UNESCO defined, heritage is our unbreakable link with the past. Its echoes affect our presence and making up the essence of our lives today. Its legacy that we are going to give to our next generations. In fact, the heritage is, since the time of our ancestors, a constant reminder that we humans are creative beings. The cultural heritage of Bosnia and Herzegovina bore witness to 2 world wars, but during the most recent one from 1992 to 1995, it faced to the great extent of devastation when some of the most significant monuments were destroyed. There are many inspiring stories about the restoration of heritage in the post-war period. A lot of stories about gorgeous people who came from all over the world to help, driven by their true and genuine empathy. But today I would like to share with you a life story of the old bridge, a magnificent construction, masterpiece of bridge building, whose reconstruction became a symbol of international cooperation, aid and support. Mostar is a city in the south of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was named after Mostars, meaning bridge guardians. It's a historical city whose architectural and urban structure embody the influences of Ottoman Empire and influences from the Christian Europe. In such way, Mostar became a testimony to the genius of builders through the ages. The most valuable part of historical area is Old Town, stretching along both Neretva river banks. The both banks in that area are connected by the old bridge. The bridge with one arc, anchored to the rocks via 2 support towers, source in the counterfort construction which connected the river banks of Neretva. The brilliance of its builder, Hayruddin, is immediately visible in his selection of the location for construction in its beautiful self-supporting elliptical arc. It's quite unusual for Ottoman bridge construction. The bridge, completed in 1566, together with the towers, by its design, function and construction, represent the unique world heritage. During the war 1992 to 1995, almost all historical landmarks in Mostar were damaged, including all the bridges connecting the Neretva river banks. But the most difficult moment happened on November morning when the old bridge was destroyed. The destruction of the old bridge meant destruction of a wonderful dream that things can be everlasting. The bridge that had stood proudly through the wars and earthquakes was gone, leaving behind alienated communities divided by the river. To these messages and consequences of the war, the world replied with a message of the peace. Under the expert guidance and patronage of UNESCO, international expert team was formed in order to reconstruct the bridge, restore the towers, Tara and Halebe, and other monuments in the surrounding. I have to stress here that UNESCO has a crucial role in the restoration of historical area of Mostar ever since 1996. After 6 years of very complex and comprehensive work, the international team of experts, in cooperation with the international community and city of Mostar, succeeded in the reconstruction of the bridge. The reconstructed old bridge was reopened in 2004. A year later, the World Heritage Committee inscribed the old bridge area of the old city of Mostar on the UNESCO World Heritage List. It was declared an exceptional and universal symbol of reconciliation and coexistence of diverse cultural, ethnic, and religious communities. Its reconstruction is simultaneously a symbol of human solidarity in striving for peace and symbol of international cooperation in times of facing and overcoming the consequences of war events. The reconstruction of the old bridge in Mostar is truly, both literally and metaphorically, a paradigm of bridging the civilization gaps caused by the war effects with the vital tool of international support, resources, and cooperation. A part of history was brought to light together with the reconstructed old bridge, symbolizing hope and belief in peaceful future. Gone for a moment beyond the shores of time and space, the old bridge reappeared where it once stood. A tragic destruction followed by rising from the ashes has had an unexpected positive effect. The bridge reconstruction has now become a symbol of building peace, a message conveyed to the whole world. The message the world sent us through the joint efforts of international local community is that we are not alone, that we are not forgotten. War brings death, suffering, anguish, fear, destruction, and darkness. It leaves scars. Peace carries the opportunity of creating a better life, an opportunity that we should use, because we can heal our wounds in time. Both war and peace require enormous energy, and how does then one choose the path of peace every day? How does one choose to build bridges in the places where seemingly unbridgeable gaps exist between cultures, ideas, people? Peace is not constant, it's not static. Peace is a choice. Peace is not a mere absence of war. In its nature, peace is active and requires constant nurture, mutual respect, understanding, tolerance, and dialogue. It requires that we learn and know how to listen to each other. Peace requires practical knowledge that we can use to build and create the same knowledge employed by the people engaged on the reconstruction of the bridge. To us, it was not simply a bridge. To me, it was not simply one bridge. To me, the old bridge is not simply architectural wonder of its time. To me, the old bridge is a symbol of hope, remembrance, purity, love, and life. One bridge, one project, and yet so many messages carried. Building a new bridge is not easy. To reconstruct the destroyed one is more difficult. But finally, as we all know, no man is an island. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Azra. Our next speaker has a perspective on peace building and mediation like no one else. He was the 7th Secretary General of the United Nations. Together with the UN, he received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2001. Since leaving the UN, he has continued working in support of peace, human rights, and development, now through his own foundation. In 2007, he helped find a peaceful solution to the political crisis following the elections in Kenya. He mediated in the conflict in Syria, and he's the chair of the Elders, a group of global leaders working for peace and human rights. He will be interviewed by someone who has served as an interface between the UN and global media in highly charged political negotiations in countries such as Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and Timor-Leste. He has also worked for the UN in New York and in Geneva. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Mr. Kofi Annan and Ahmad Fawzi.
Well, thank you very much, Vivian, for that warm introduction, and thank you all for showing up in such great numbers. Secretary General, it's an honor to be here with you. I will dive straight into the subject matter because our time is limited. I've had the privilege and pleasure and honor of working with you over the years and watching you build bridges firsthand in various conflict areas, whether it was Iraq or Syria or the troubled Middle East between Israel and Palestine. I recall in particular your trip to Baghdad in 1998, almost 20 years ago now, when you prepared the groundwork so carefully to sign a memorandum of understanding with then President Saddam Hussein to open the palaces to the inspectors. It was fraught with all kinds of difficulties and complications. Tell us a bit about how that experience shaped your own mediation and bridge building techniques, please.
First of all, let me say how happy I am to see so many young people in this room. It's important to realize that the leaders of tomorrow are determined to engage and engage actively. And I'm sure this will continue. Ahmed, thank you very much for your question. We were together in many of these travel spots. And I recall the decision I took to go to Iraq when some members of the Security Council didn't want me to go. And I recall Madeleine Albright asking me, Kofi, would you go even if Uncle Sam is opposed to it? And I said, I will. It's my sacred duty as Secretary General to seek peace wherever we can. So I shall go. And Ahmed is right. We prepared the ground, sent in people to look at some other palaces and check the grounds, and sent people ahead of me, raised the key issue, because when you are going to get involved in these negotiations, you have to take time to understand what is involved. You don't rush in. You need to think it through. You need to understand what is a worry and the concern of the protagonist, what their fears are, what the expectations are, and really to be able to help. Because sometimes we may go in and tell somebody, oh, if you do this and that, we will bring you humanitarian assistance or we'll give you development assistance. And they still don't react because that is not what they are worried about. Sometimes they are worried for their life. What's the point of development and humanitarian assistance if you are afraid that tomorrow you'll be killed? So you have to really try and understand the concerns and begin to work with them on it. So the mediator has to listen, has to prepare the ground well, has to try to understand the concerns of those he or she is trying to help, and you should never go in with preconceived ideas. And you must be prepared to change your attitude, what you are building up to. If in the discussions something comes up which is quite crucial. So listening, preparing, and working with the protagonist is extremely important.
In fact, one of the people you sent in advance was Staffan de Mistura to map the palaces.
That's correct. Stefan went ahead with a team to map the palaces, and it was for me unthinkable because the whole conflict was going to explode because the UN had inspectors on the ground looking for weapons of mass destruction. There was suspicion that some of these weapons were hidden in palaces and wanted President Saddam Hussein to open the palaces. And he said, I'm not going to open my palaces to let foreigners and inspectors roam everywhere. It's an insult to the national dignity of Iraq. And because of that, the US government was getting ready to bomb Iraq. And for me, it was unimaginable that refusal to open palaces, which could be done, would be a cause for war. So I said, I will go and see if I can convince him to open his palace, save his people from bombs from the air. And that's what made me go in. And of course, as Ahmed said, I sent a team in to prepare the ground. And we went in, and for the first time, Iraq allowed lots of journalists to come in, because normally the journalists were not allowed. You remember that?
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that before I move on from that subject, that you didn't forget the media. That you suggested, actually, that we escort plane loads of journalists into Baghdad, which hitherto had been forbidden for them. There were perhaps a group of 50 journalists on the ground. By the time we arrived, there were 200 journalists. And we flew in from Cyprus and Kuwait City, I remember, and prepared the ground with the media, because you really and truly understand the value of communication in situations like this and how it can affect the bridge building process.
No, absolutely essential to get the right message out, get the right information out, and work with the media. In most cases, even when I was working in Kenya, I met often with the media owners, telling them, you have to be responsible. You are part of the society. You cannot let it fall apart, and you cannot allow wrong information and incitement in your newspapers. So it was absolutely crucial, and they did cooperate.
Indeed, and when you left the United Nations Secretary General, you didn't rest on your laurels, far from it. In fact, you got involved immediately in Kenya, where there was some post-election stress, shall I say, violence going on. Recently, you were involved in Myanmar with the Advisory Commission. You've also helped Nigeria through a peaceful transition. Elections seem very important to you. Why is it that they're so integral to the democratic process?
No, elections are extremely important, because normally we should see it as peaceful and democratic rotation of leadership. But elections are important when the people believe their votes count, that their votes are not being manipulated, and that they have participated in an election with integrity. An election with integrity confers legitimacy on the winner and also protects the interests of the loser. Where people believe that their votes don't count because the system has either been manipulated or both with money are buying votes or are buying politicians who take decisions for them and protect their interest, you run into difficulties. I mean, these days it's not unusual to see elections leading to conflict instead of leading to peaceful rotation of leadership. About 7 years ago, the foundation set up what we called then the Global Commission for Elections, Democracy and Security. And we had some really wonderful people on the panel, Amartya Sen, Ernesto Zedillo, Luis Abur, and we came up with a very good report. And in the report, we pointed out some of the difficulties that democracy was facing, arguing that too much money in elections hollows out democracy. In fact, we use US as a very bad example where there's too much money in politics and elections. When that report came out, all the organizations managing elections around the world approached us and said, we should do something with this report. There are really solid proposals. We didn't want to create another organization. For heaven's sake, we have too many organizations already. So what we decided to do was to create a platform where these organizations will meet at the foundation twice a year to look down the line at elections that are coming up in the next 24 months or 18 months, identify the ones which are going to be problematic, and determine what we can do to help the situation. So this group meets twice a year, and we discuss issues. And of course, as you can all tell, elections have become quite problematic. Recently, we held a Latin American regional seminar on elections in Mexico City, and another one in Kuala Lumpur for Asia, and we expect to hold another one in Cameroon for Africa, really looking at these issues. And of course, if you can understand that even the US is worried about the sanctity of its elections, you can imagine how some of the smaller countries worry today as to who will be interfering with their elections. And so we will continue looking at what we can do to help elections and the legitimacy and integrity of elections.
Thank you, Secretary General. I'd like to talk for a few minutes about youth. You mentioned youth and the importance of youth, and we see a lot of young people in the room today who are yearning for inspiration and yearning to become involved. And I was quite impressed, and I'm sure you were too, with Chris Picciolini's presentation when he spoke about their search for identity and purpose. Youth, it seems, have lost faith in their governments today, have lost faith in the system. What can we do to help them, well, not regain, but what can we do to engage them in this process and encourage them to become part of a global movement for peace and for bridge building?
First of all, let me say that it's not only youth who have lost confidence in governments. It's not only youth who feel that the system is not working for them. They are not the only ones who feel that the rich and the powerful have undue advantage over political processes and decision-making, and that with money and contribution to politicians, they can influence things. It's not only the youth who are worried about the inequality in our societies, where ordinary people seem to think that the political system works for the rich and not for them. When you look at what happened in 2008, where governments in the US, for example, came up with trillions to save banks and powerful institutions at the time when the ordinary people were losing their homes and there was no help for them. And then after that you hear, oh, these were too big to fail. The sense is, oh yes, they were too big to fail, but we are too small to matter. So there's anger everywhere, but the young people can make a difference. You can decide to participate in politics. You have the vote, you have the right to use, to make your voices heard. You take your vote for granted. In some countries, people are dying and fighting to get the vote. You have it, but you don't use it. You should vote. You should participate. And not only should you participate, you can also lead. I've often said that one is never too young to lead. And we are not too old to learn. I'm always learning, But you have the capacity to lead. As individuals, you have power. You have power in how you use your vote. You have power in the choices you make, whether on companies that are green, companies that are fighting to protect the environment, or parties that are progressive. And on issues that are important to you, you should really insist and make so much noise that you move your issue up the political agenda so that the politicians and the leaders cannot ignore you. You should also organize yourselves to take action. I've often been approached by young people to say, how do you become a good global citizen? How do you become a leader? And then I ask them to tell me what they are doing with themselves, what they did during their summer holidays. And they tell you, oh, I went to help disadvantaged people with English lessons, math lessons, and a group of friends and I did this and that and that. And you realize they're already leaders, but they don't realize it. When we talk of leadership, nobody's asking you to go and resolve Syria or to go and deal with North Korea. It starts in your community, in your school, in your organization. where you see something is wrong and decide, I'm going to do something about this, and organize with friends to act. If we all do our little bit, collectively, we make a giant contribution. So use the energy, the creativity in you. You are the men and women of your times. You are connected, you are wired, you understand this world better than people my generation. Use that knowledge well, use that connection, that partnerships around the world that you've established, use them well. And I must say, today I get a bit worried because when you hear some of the leaders making aggressive statements, making threats at a time when we need to cooperate, at a time when the world has become so interconnected and we are dealing with problems that no one country, however powerful, can handle alone. Don't be impressed by these noises, unfortunately sometimes coming from leaders. We need to work together, and you have to be part of the change you want to be. And so I'm relying on you to deliver.
Wow. That would have been a great note to end on, but I'm not finished.
Why don't you?
And the youth in this room have a mandate now to go and make a lot of noise and be the change you want to be. Secretary General, can I just conclude by asking you, I see Achim looking at me and shaking his head, but I know you have a concept about the three greatest problems that humanity is facing today. Inequality, if I'm right, climate change, and an area we visited a lot together, the Middle East, the situation in the Middle East. Can you elaborate briefly on that?
No, absolutely. I believe that inequality is causing quite a lot of the divisions we see today. People who feel left behind and have a sense that their governments are not doing anything about it, nor even discussing it with them and coming up with programs for helping them. You know, at the end of the Industrial Revolution, governments came up with safety nets. At the end of World War, they came up with safety nets to help people. Now you have people whose incomes have been going down for about 3-4 decades, don't see where things are going to turn around in their favor. And they see robots, 3D printing, innovation taking away jobs. And governments are not talking to them, not telling them, yes, we know these are difficult times. We have a program for you. We have a program that will retrain you for the jobs that are coming, rather than pretending that the jobs have moved to China, Mexico, and we're going to bring them back, that we're going to bring coal back. Coal is not coming back. The jobs didn't go to Mexico or China. It's innovation and artificial intelligence, 3D printing, that took the jobs away. Take driverless cars. When driverless cars come in the US alone, they claim there are about 20 million jobs associated with driving. What happens to those drivers? What are we doing about them? What happens to other areas where science and innovation is disrupting activities and jobs for people? The leaders have to engage them, and if the leaders don't engage, you make them engage. You raise a question. You ask them, what are you doing about these issues? Don't let them get away with it. It's a two-way traffic. You cannot leave everything to the leaders, and I firmly also believe that in situations where leaders fail to lead, the people can lead. That is, you can lead and make them follow. So don't underestimate your own power. On climate change, climate is an all-encompassing threat. It's a threat to our health, our source of food and water, and to our very existence. And so if we don't focus on it and collectively try to mitigate climate change and do something about it, all our efforts are going to come to naught. what's the point of pushing for development, and if tomorrow the world is we are in an entirely different world? So we have to take climate change seriously and work together to deal with it. Middle East is an area, as you say, Ahmad, we've worked very closely. We've done lots of work in. And there was a time when one talked about Middle East crisis, one was talking about Palestinian and Israel. It was that limited when one talked of Middle East crisis. But today, the whole region, starting from North Africa, Libya, Iraq, Syria, and you can stretch it all the way to Afghanistan. And when you see what is happening in the Middle East, it is tragic. In Syria, for example, there are lots of proxy wars. Lots of people are fighting in Syria. And some of the wars and the fighting has nothing to do with Syrians. It's a proxy war between competing powers. And also one thing we need to understand, when outsiders get involved in civil wars of the nature we've seen in Syria, it prolongs a war. Let's assume that the civil war had been limited to only Syrians. In my judgment, the war would have ended. First of all, they would have been tired. They wouldn't have the resources to continue it for 7 years and going on. But because they have outside supporters, if there is no more ammunition, they bring it in. If they need money, they give them the money, and the war goes on. But I think the only way to solve the crisis in the Middle East and in Syria in particular is, I believe we need to work together. You remember when we were working together on Syria, I pushed for the Geneva Communique, which said what is required in Syria was a transitional government with full executive authority. And I got everyone to sign, the permanent members. Hillary Clinton signed, Lavrov signed the document, and they were to go to New York and follow through. But they went to New York, and instead of following through, started fighting each other and pointing fingers at each other. And I decided those who gave me the job were not as serious as I was, and that the war was going to go on. I don't know if you recall, when I left at one of our last meetings with the staff, I said, don't worry, tomorrow they will be where I am today. And I thought tomorrow will come in within 3 months maximum, but it did not come till 3 years later, when they met in Vienna and decided to go back to Geneva Communique and work on the basis of a transitional government. The only way we can resolve the crisis in Syria is if the Syrians, the regional powers, and the international community work together on a common framework and come to the conclusion that no one is going to win this war. And even those who claim they have won, what have you won? A ruined state, a destroyed state? What sort of victory is that? And the whole culture destroyed. And so I think they will have to come together and work together. My hope is that if the 3 circles, the first circle being Syrian, second one being regional powers, and the third international community, come together and bring everybody together around a common framework and give the Middle East its Westphalia moment. After all, Europe, after 30-year war, realized everybody was a loser, and they met in Westphalia and got the Treaty of Westphalia. I hope sooner or later, Middle East would also have its Westphalia moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. And in fact, the Geneva Communique is still one of the main pillars of the negotiations on that front. Kofi Annan, Secretary General, thank you very much for joining us here on the International Day of Peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what powerful messages on the International Day of Peace, specifically for the youth, but not just for the youth, also for the elders, and for those of us who have responsibilities. This relates also back to a very fundamental reason why we have the Geneva Peace Talks, because underlined to all these stories is that building peace is something for everyone. It's not just for specialists or people who call themselves peace negotiators, but it's something where each and everyone has a role to play in building peace, or what we hear about today is about building bridges. And this is where we are coming now into the second part of the Geneva Peace Talks about building bridges. We have heard in the first segment about stories, what it takes to build bridges. In the second segment, we will now go on a global tour to visit bridge builders across the world. And in the first step in this global tour, we're going to be in South Korea and North Korea. We will hear from Mr. Won from South Korea, who has dedicated his life to music, and in particular to his violin. He joins us to talk about music and peace, and how music can connect people in ways that words cannot. Mr. Won, the floor is yours.
Thank you for listening my music. There are no lyrics or words in the music we just heard, just music. But the music carries powerful emotions. Happiness, love, sadness, hopelessness, frustration, warmth, and grief. Although these emotions are difficult to express in words, you understood the message behind the music because it has the power to touch the hearts and minds with a unique sincerity that pierces even vacuums in the absence of air. The DMZ, demilitarized zone in the Korean Peninsula, is one place on earth that desperately needs music. For 72 years, communication has been disconnected across the DMZ, separating North and South Korea. Just before I came here on August 12, 2017, the Lindenbaum Festival Orchestra, including me, had a peace concert inside the DMZ. But we did not invite the North Korean musicians. It was an orchestra with young South Korean students, US students from Harvard University, UK tuba principal, and the choir of old South Korean generations. Our programs were quite interesting that we performed 2 pieces composed equally by North and South Koreans and 5 Korean traditional songs. The concert was inside the DMZ Camp Greaves Hall, which is approximately 1 kilometer away from the North Korean region. And there were about 200 audiences who had to file all their names and passports to the South Korean military division in order to come inside the DMZ. Just a few minutes before the concert was beginning, I suggested to our conductor that it would be wonderful if we play our last piece, which was Arirang, a Korean folk song, outside, near the fence, so the North Korean could listen our playing through air. It was a very hot with a strong sunshine around 3 o'clock p.m. in the afternoon. But it was an inspirational moment that everyone played and sang Arirang in one. And our wish was very simple, that the sound went beyond the fence so the North Korean could listen. However, it has been more than 8 years that I tried very hard. And a joint concert between North and South Korea has never happened in the Korean Peninsula. So let me please introduce for myself. I am a violinist who came from South Korea and have a dream of performing together with North Korean musicians. When I was young, I saw my grandfather longing for his mother by checking her pair of shoes in his drawer. And I realized her tomb was in North Korea, that none of our families were able to visit until now. Learning and playing music have made me encounter the story of Daniel Barenboim, who is a founder of the East-West Divan Orchestra, composed of young musicians from Palestine and Israel countries. This inspiration had naturally become my motivation of meeting with the North Korean through music. Trying very hard means more than just preparing a concert. It should be first started by convincing my government, South Korea. In Korea, we have 72 years of division, the Korean War in 1950, truce treaty. It means still in the middle of war. No exchanged economic and cultural programs, and a lack of communication and prohibited contact for North and South Korea. With all references and those circumstances, there must be official permissions by two Korean governments, and then I am able to propose my musical dialogue to North Korea. Although I had proposed our venues in Seoul and Pyongyang, capital cities of two Koreas, in 2011, a neutral nation in Switzerland in 2013, and the nation which had a similar history of us, like Germany, in 2014. But a joint concert did not work out. For example, if one side permits, the other disagreed. Actually, there was a very close moment that a joint concert could have happened.